Hello, Bible readers. It is August 11th. Our readings are from Exodus chapters 8 through 10 as we hear about all the plagues except for the 10th one, and from Matthew chapter 10 when the theme of that portion of Matthew is all about, well, as this commentary says, continuity between the preaching and activity of Jesus and those of the 12. This must have been a really controversial part of what the church was facing at the time. In each and every story that the gospel writers choose to share, they're addressing a particular concern. Maybe they're trying to make a Christological claim. That means, who is Jesus? What is he about? Maybe they're not just trying to recount historical fact. It's not just an autobiography where they're trying to offer the complete picture of Jesus. Each and every word that a gospel writer uses is done with a specific effect in mind. And there must have been controversy among the early church about who's fraudulent, who's real. When someone shows up to your town in the name of Jesus, how can I trust what a person says or what a person says I should do? And so this chapter, these verses that we're reading from Matthew today, speak to that, that the mission of the 12 to Israel is a continuation and prolongation of Jesus's mission. Matthew's community perceived itself as having a special role within Israel, to show other Jews that theirs was the authentic way of Judaism after 70 AD, when a new form of Judaism has to happen because the temple has been destroyed again. And so the instructions that happen in this part of Matthew are very significant. The Jewish people encounter persecution throughout their history, no different than in Matthew's time. So that's the significance of the portion of Matthew we're reading today. And when we think about our Exodus text today, it's a continuation of much that I talked about yesterday as far as, this is God versus Pharaoh. But specifically now we get into the different plagues. And I'm just going to focus a little bit on the plague of frogs and how Pharaoh interacts with Moses and with God, and how God then responds to Pharaoh. It says a lot about who our God is as far as how God responds to Pharaoh. It's interesting that as Pharaoh speaks to the Lord, as this author says, the Lord intends the well-being even of Pharaoh and of Egypt. Note that God's readiness to hear prayer for Pharaoh is based on the hint in the narrative that Pharaoh has at least in part acknowledged the rule of God. Prayer is heard from those who accept the rule of God, to whom prayer is addressed. I mean, that's an important thing for all of us non-Jews to know, and that truth is laid out earlier than this, but continues even in the midst of Pharaoh being Pharaoh. God is still willing to engage with and listen to him on behalf of Egypt. The willingness of God to deal with Pharaoh and with Egypt is, even though God's willing to deal with and listen to, uncompromising. God's not going to compromise. Graciousness on the part of God is not to be understood as accommodation, as though God's going to say, okay, you have that part and I'll have this part. No, God is still God. This lesson is so urgent for any superpower, or for any of us who imagine a piece of our lives where we get to have the final say. Pharaoh here imagines he can enlist the goodness of God and yet retain his turf. The subsequent narrative makes clear that Pharaoh can't have it both ways. And of course, neither can we. As much as we appreciate God's activity in this story, we got to see ourselves in it too, as we are many times Pharaoh. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.